the Massachusetts Commission for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing.
George Balsley, a historical snapshot, recorded on October 12, 2021, in South Hadley, Massachusetts. Hello, and good afternoon. My name is George Balsley. I live in Hadley, in the western part of Massachusetts. And the reason I'm here is to talk about me as a consumer under the Massachusetts Commission for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing, MCDHH. I grew up in Amherst, Massachusetts, and moved to and worked as an architect in Boston. But first, I went to school in Boston for architecture, graduated, and worked in Boston for 2 or 3 different firms. Then I got married in '79 and moved to Northampton, where I lived for a year. And then my wife and I moved to Amherst, and 4 years later to Hadley. As an architect, I worked for several architectural firms. And as a deaf person, how could I function with hearing people in my environment? Well, fortunately, I was able to talk, not perfectly, but adequately. Communicating by signing was another matter. Back in the 1980s, teletypewriter, TTY technology, applied to work, was not so good. It was good for communication between deaf individuals, but between deaf and hearing persons, it was not so good. Equipment would have to be purchased and brought in. For me, it was frustrating to have to ask coworkers to make phone calls for me, such as calling a window company representative for a meeting, and things like that. Then, through encouragement by MSRD and MCDHH, an idea came up for a relay telephone service. So I participated in this relay company in trying to lobby the State House for passing a bill to establish a relay service. I stood on the floor of the State House before an audience and gave a speech. I don't recall the year. It was 1990, 93, or 94. Someone watching this probably knows. For my presentation, I brought a telephone with me, held it up, and said, "I'm deaf. How can I use this?" to illustrate the need for a relay in which a deaf caller would type on a TTY to a hearing operator who would then speak to a hearing person on the other end and vice versa. A 3-way process like we have today. Finally, the bill was passed in order to help the police, because I think the police wanted a relay integrated with the 911 system. Without that one piece of support, it probably would not have passed. But gratefully, it came together. I remember things were very primitive back then, with long waits in getting calls through, needing to call for a pizza or a business call. Long waits, 30 minutes, 20 minutes. Later on, things improved. I was on an RFP, request for proposal, team to come up with a new relay service for Massachusetts under the New England Telephone Company. We put together a list of the top 10 mandatory regulations, converted these to a request for proposal, and distributed it. Proposals came back, not to me, but to others on the team at New England Telephone. And we picked a company. I think it was MCI. It was set up, made ready, and it was such a better, efficient service. Now it's under Sorensen, ZVRS, Purple, and other companies that have been set up. Happily, companies have been established by the deaf themselves. Sorensen is a big company. Now, phone services to get through to what you need are much better than 20 years ago. For me personally, the new system for work was marvelous. I could make and receive calls to anyone at work. At meetings with hearing people, I was asked, "How can you call me when you're deaf?" And I could dismiss that by explaining that there's a system by which I can go through an operator, and the response was, "That's great, that's really great." And we could talk to each other. Now I'm retired, and I'm still using the relay service for many other things, such as back and forth discussions about Medicare and so on. Getting back to MCDHH, back in 1985 or 86, when it started, and thereafter, that period of time was the so-called golden years, because so many deaf people in the community participated by volunteering to host events, and it spread. Now, in 2021, things have gone silent. Really quiet. Granted, the COVID pandemic has been part of it, yes, but it has been really awful for the general deaf community. I think part of it is because of these cell phones, where people are so absorbed in texting, or TV at home with captions. Pretty neat. You don't need to go out, and people don't feel a need to volunteer for community services. We need more socialization, where people get together, see each other, and participate in workshops or presentations. George's final words to us are a call for robust community engagement in advocating for a more just, accessible, inclusive, and equitable society. Thank you, George.
Follow us on social media. Scan the QR code below or visit linktree.com/MASS, capital C, capital D, capital H, capital H.